Early this year, in a windswept Lincolnshire field, a metal detectorist found an extraordinary gold object. It turned out to be a sword handle dating back 1400 years, which once would have been fitted with a magnificent blade. But whose hand wielded this weapon? Saxon king or Viking warrior? And what monsters did it slay? Treasure. It's all around us.
Look at that!
Every day, new finds are bringing our history to life.
I think we've got a find over here.
I'm Miranda Kristovnikov. Join me in this hidden world, where passions run high, where secrets are kept, and where serious money can be made. The world of hidden treasure. This week, I'm heading up to Lincolnshire, where the sword handle was found. Unfortunately, our finder wishes to remain anonymous, so I'm going to meet the local archaeologist who first saw the find, Kevin Leahy.
Now, this is a truly amazing find. Who actually found it?
It's found by a local metal detector user, someone who's been metal detecting for 30 years.
So how did you feel when you first saw it?
Well, it didn't all come at once. The objects were taken out of a box one after the other. I mean, one find would have been incredible, one piece of gold, and then another piece, like rabbits coming out of a hat as it slowly appeared. I mean, it's something we'll never ever forget.
And what did you do with the find then?
Well, we're one of the recording centres for the Portable Antiquities scheme. Government's run scheme for recording metal detector finds and other archaeological objects that are picked up. So we reported the find to the coroner because it's gold.
And it's treasure.
And potentially treasure. And it needs to be reported to the coroner, and it needs to be reported to the British Museum, who'll prepare a report on it. So the thing was taken down to Angela Evans at the British Museum, whose reaction was probably just like my own when I first saw it. It's quite an impressive object.
I headed down to the British Museum in London to begin my investigation. I couldn't wait to find out from which period the sword handle dated and who might have owned it. Deep in the heart of the museum, I met Angela Evans, the curator, and Leslie Webster, the keeper of the Prehistory and Europe department.
I hope you're ready for this. Here we go. Wow.
Oh my God.
It's beautiful.
Just scary. That is
Absolutely fantastic.
It's a very, very high class, very swanky piece. I mean, it really is quite amazing.
Yeah. Any ideas how old it is?
Well, my guess would be early 7th century.
Yeah, it's so sophisticated, I think it must be into the 7th century.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, I'm really intrigued about how all the different pieces fit together. I don't know if we can actually handle them and try and put them together. Is that possible?
Oh, I think they probably can, and it'd be rather fun to play three-dimensional jigsaw.
Oh, good. If we pull that back.
At the top goes the pommel. The lower guard goes next.
Okay.
Then this bit here, binding hilt itself together, would have fitted on there, fitted directly on there. Then the iron grip covered with wood, we would guess. Then this would have fitted on there. And then finally, there would have been another piece like that underneath that.
The nearest parallel to our sword handle was found in the fantastic site discovered at Sutton Hoo in Suffolk in the late 1930s. Under one of these burial mounds, archaeologists unearthed the richest Anglo-Saxon burial ever found in Britain, probably that of a king or a famous warrior. The Sutton Hoo sword is also kept at the British Museum, but how did it compare to our Lincolnshire find?
Mm-hmm. And this probably will actually make it look even better, because if you put that
fantastic.
alongside the Sutton Hoo sword grip fittings, and you can see actually, the spacing between the guards, the similarities, the pommel, the grip in between where this is.
Isn't it?
What it hasn't got, of course, are these wonderful bands. It's got little clips instead.
Yes, instead of these deep collars.
But what kind of sword blade would have been attached to such an exquisite handle?
We have a copy or a remake of the Sutton Hoo blade.
The guys who made blades like this were real master craftsmen, as you can see from this fabulously intricate pattern.
beautiful.
The swirling pattern on the sword is created by the way the blacksmith forged the blade, making each sword a unique object and much prized by its owner.
So would that sort of blade have gone with our hilt?
Yeah, almost certainly. And this is actually very sharp. I mean, you wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of a swipe from this sword.
So we're not quite sure where it was made, and I guess you probably want to have a bit more of a closer look, do you?
Yes, I think we've got to go and chase up our sources.
Yeah, I think a little bit of research work on this. I mean, we've got our own sort of preliminary gut feelings about it, but there are some parallels we can certainly be chasing up and thinking more deeply about.
Absolutely.
And of course, we'd want to talk to the lab and so on.
Yeah. Can I leave that with you? I'm going to go and catch up with Kevin in Lincolnshire.
Okay.
Have some fun with that. I'm sure you will.
Oh, we have a wonderful time with it, yeah.
Bye.
Our sword handle looks the equal of the Sutton Hoo sword. So, does this mean we might have a lavish burial in Lincolnshire comparable to Sutton Hoo? I headed back up north to catch up with Kevin, who had some theories of his own.
It was found here, was it?
This is it. X marks the spot.
Right, just here?
Yes, this is the very place that it was discovered.
Right.
You can see we're in a sort of flat landscape, but we are quite close to the river.
Now, why was this sword buried in this location?
There's a number of possible reasons. The most boring one is it's casual loss. You know, it slipped out of someone's scabbard and was gone. They must have been really unhappy to lose that. It's possible it's a votive deposit. The river's just over there, and swords were often thrown into rivers as part of a ritual. My favourite option is that it comes from a grave, and that the rest of the grave deposit is down here under our feet. That's the preferred option.
And why do you think there would be a grave here? Is there a significance about this location?
Yes, there is. This is a very significant spot in that a number of parish boundaries meet here. We've noticed that Anglo-Saxon burials are often on parish boundaries.
So there are three possibilities. Was it lost or dropped in battle? Was it an offering to the gods placed in the river? Or was it part of an unknown burial? The only way to find out is to investigate the site. The first job was a geophysical survey of the area surrounding the find spot. Jim's machine is able to measure tiny changes in the magnetic field beneath the ground. From this, we can produce a map of these underground features and hopefully locate the lost burial. It didn't take long for Jim and his colleague David to collate their results.
We're not superstitious, but what have we got? Has anything come out?
Just trying to remove some of the stronger magnetic anomalies, and then it will let us know if we've got any more subtle features. Unfortunately, there doesn't appear to be anything too dramatic as regards archaeology.
There's a dark line running across there. That's in the right area, the area that we're interested in.
It's about 1 metre to the north of the hole that was left from the metal-detectorist.
Now that could be really interesting. I mean, it could of course be a horseshoe, it could be mineralisation, but it could be the blade of the sword.
Quite easily, yes.
Though the results of the survey were disappointing, there was a geophysical anomaly in the ground which was very close to where the sword fittings were found. Could it be the missing sword blade? It was time to get the crew digging.
So what's happened here so far?
Well, we've had the digging crew in and they've taken off all the topsoil. They've machined off to begin with, and then they've gone in and cleaned off so that we can see the top of the subsoil. Now, at this stage, hopefully we should have seen a grave cut, the black shape of the grave, or a ring ditch around the grave, but unfortunately, nothing's showing.
The burial theory was looking unlikely, but there could be another reason why our sword ended up where it did. It could have been placed in the river as an offering to the gods, and then, when the river was dredged, it found its way back to dry land and was buried in the upcast or gravel.
And what about the metal detecting? Has that brought up anything yet?
That looks good. That really looks encouraging. He's got 4 or 5 signals, and one of them looks promising. It looks as if it's something solid. It might be sort of gold or silver. Kind of crossed fingers and all.
Another bit of the sword, yeah.
Yes, but all we can do here is to try and sort out whether or not this really is upcast from the river.
Yeah, because I mean, hang on, that's if your sword, or if the sword was found in this upcast, surely that sort of knocks your grave theory on the head a bit, doesn't it?
Not altogether, says he, desperately clutching at straws, because it is possible that there had been a burial here and that it had been destroyed by the river, because rivers move about with time. And remember, we're still on the parish boundaries when we would expect a burial to occur.
Kevin is also a fines advisor for the Portable Antiquities Scheme, and today is meeting with Keith Kelway, a metal detectorist who has come to report a recent find.
Rick, it's a sword pyramid.
Oh, fabulous. What period?
Well, it's Anglo-Saxon. It's going to be late 6th or 7th century.
By coincidence, the find is another sword fitting called a pyramid mount. But this one is silver with an unusual decoration and stone, and is of great interest to Anglo-Saxon experts. Kevin will record the mount and send details to the Portable Antiquities Scheme. They're based next to the British Museum in London, and I went there to meet their education officer, Kynwyn Paynton, to discover what the scheme is all about.
Very well, thank you. How does the Portable Antiquities Scheme actually work?
It's basically a voluntary recording scheme, so that when people find things, whether they're out with a metal detector or maybe farmers or even people walking their dogs or gardening, when they find archaeological objects, they can bring it to a fines liaison officer, normally based at a local museum, who records the object, tells them what it is, but more importantly records that archaeological information so it's not lost forever.
And all that information goes on this database, does it?
It does, yes. So you can actually search this database and see what kind of thing has been found in your area.
So with each object, they're measuring it, they're taking a location, they're taking pictures, so all the information is here and available for other people to look at?
Yeah, basically the fines liaison officer squeezes all the information they can out of the find so they can find out about the people that were living there, what was going on, what state the archaeology is in, and more or less that information is on the website. The exact location of where it was found isn't on the website because it could be an archaeologically sensitive site, but other than that you can see exactly what it is, where it was found, and pictures of it as well.
Yeah. Since 1997, 50,000 objects have been recorded by the Portable Antiquities Scheme. These red spots mark other recorded finds in the Lincolnshire area, but only 2 of these are weapons. Would we be able to put another red dot on the map by the end of the excavation? Back at the dig, the archaeologists were working hard, but still nothing had turned up. With time pressing, they decide to dig a deeper trench on site. Would this reveal Kevin's fabulous burial?
Oh, hi there.
Hi there.
Run me through the different sections of it then.
Well, what we've got right at the top, we've got the topsoil that's supporting the grass now.
Yeah.
And this orange stuff is gravel, and it's the same sort of thing as we've got right at the bottom of the trench, which means it's come from a much deeper location.
Right.
So the obvious place that it's come from is the river just over the other side of this hedge. And what is likely to have happened is that at some point when they've been cleaning the river out, they've dredged up all this material and created a flood bank along the edge of the river.
And that's the evidence of it there?
This is the bottom of the flood bank. You can see a very straight line.
Because our sword fittings were found here in the gravel layer, they must have been brought up from the river. If it was a burial, they should have been found here in the lower levels. But what about the anomaly found in the geophysics report? Jim was taking detector readings. Had he found the sword blade?
I'm still getting a signal, it's about here.
And that's buried underneath this recent upcast from the river?
That's right, yes. This dark material's sealed beneath the yellow, that's the bank, so it's definitely earlier.
So this could be part of a grave in some sort of situ?
Yes, it's certainly earlier.
This is interesting. This is looking very interesting.
What had Kevin found? I couldn't wait, and I wasn't alone. The next day, I brought a very excited Angela up from the British Museum. Neither of us wanted to miss the opportunity of seeing a sword being excavated.
Kevin, hi.
Hiya.
We've got here.
Hi, Kevin.
Where's the find?
We haven't touched it. It's still
Oh,
there.
brilliant, it's still in. Good.
Well, let's get to it.
At moments like this, I always think of Howard Carter looking through and saying, you know, what's there? What can you see? Wonderful things.
Wonderful things. Well, maybe it is going to be a wonderful
Let's
thing,
have
you never
a
know.
poke and see.
Something coming out.
Something
Something
out.
coming
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
It's here.
What is it?
It's here.
Yeah.
What is
It's
it?
here. It's a lark. All I can say is it is an early light fitting. It's pre-1960 because it's quite a thick metal section. Now they're made out of it. What it means is that this is an old plough surface that it got down there.
Yeah.
This material up here, the upcast from the river, is a bank that was probably flattened about 20 or 30 years ago, and then has been spread across this plough surface, and has not been ploughed since, because otherwise it would have been all jumbled up. It does actually do something. It rules out altogether any possibility that those sword fittings are in situ in this area. They've come from the river.
Right.
Whether,
So no burial.
no burial here. We've still got the link between the parish boundary and the location, but in an area where there's a history of finds of weapons dumped into the river, I think we're getting more towards it being a votive deposit.
Well, that finally seems to rule out the burial theory. In our search to find the elusive blade, one of the metal-detectorist volunteers to scour the riverbed.
Is there something there, Chris?
Yeah, there's a signal there.
Is
You
it
got a
very big?
signal? Wait for me, hang on. Have you got a signal there, Chris?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Fantastic. Is it strong?
It's strong, but it's not that big. It's iron,
Yeah?
there'd be iron, but it could be a nail or anything like that.
So is it possible to get it out, whatever's down there?
I'll have a good go.
Kevin, what do you reckon it might be?
With it being small, it could just be a bit of iron concretion in here, and there's a lot of iron in the subsoil here. He may have got that. There's something. No, it's a piece of gravel.
The river has been dredged many times in the last couple of 100 years, and it's highly unlikely any archaeological objects would have survived. Not that Angela agreed with the river theory anyway.
The little English. I have this kind of problem with the idea of votive offering because, you know, the Anglo-Saxons really treasured their swords. They gifted them to people. And I can't see them slinging a sword of this quality into the river.
So do you think it might be a burial then?
Well, that's certainly what I thought first of all, because, you know, the breaks on the sword hilt are so fresh. But when you look at the ground where the sword hilt was found, the pieces were found, I mean, there's no absolute evidence at all for any grave scenario.
Right.
So I'm just baffled. I'm really baffled. I don't know what it is. Could be casual loss, perhaps. But, you know, how do people lose their swords? I mean, are they knocked down in battle, maybe, or something like that?
Right. So no more clues as to sort of narrow down our arguments a bit?
No, it's just turning into one of those exotic but wonderful stray finds.
Perplexed? Well, I think we all are. The dig didn't prove anything conclusively, one way or another. But we haven't exhausted all avenues yet. These beautiful objects must have come from somewhere, and we need to go back in time to discover their history. When the Roman legions left Britain in the early 5th century, pagan invaders swept in from the continent. Angles, Saxons and Jutes fought fierce battles to set up their kingdoms across the country. Some of their names are still with us today: Northumbria, Wessex and Mercia. We know about the exploits of these kings through legends, sagas and wills that have survived over 1,000 years. I returned to the British Museum where Leslie Webster had been searching through these ancient texts to see if she could help us find the origins of our sword.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi.
How are you getting on?
Well, I mean, the fascinating thing that emerges from the literary and the documentary evidence, both the poetry and the records, is just how important and how prized and treasured swords were in this period. They're often described as ancient heirlooms. They were things that were passed on from generation to generation. And when we turn to the wills, particularly in the later Saxon period, we see lots and lots of bequests of richly decorated swords. There's a very nice will of Athelstan the Atheling, that means prince, who was the son of King Ethelred the Unready. And he left 11 swords in his will, and most interestingly, To his brother Edmund, he left the sword which belonged to King Offa. Now, Offa the Great was a king who reigned in the later 8th century. This will is dated 1014, so that sword would have been about 200 years old when it was left.
So swords were incredibly prized possessions, considered hugely powerful, and were even given names. Over time, legends developed around these beautiful weapons, like the great Saxon poem Beowulf. It's dedicated to a mythical king whose sword is slayer of both men and monsters.
He's doing terrific battle with the frightful monster Grendel's mother, and his own sword fails him. He can't pierce her disgusting tough hide. And he sees, hanging on the wall, this wonderful sword. It's described as the work of giants, an old heirloom. He seizes it off the wall and cuts her head off with it, and such is the heat of her blood that the blade of the sword melts away, leaving just the hilt. And of course, in our case, the blade isn't there, although whether it was monster's blood that actually melted it away. It's a nice thought, isn't it?
Monsters or serpents characterise much of Saxon art and mythology, and their images can be seen on many of the wonderful treasure items found at Sutton Hoo. If you look carefully, here you can see two serpents intertwined.
Because it's so easy.
Scientist Susan Lanice has been analysing the design of our own sword fitting. What parallels can she and Angela see?
The weaving pattern on this is absolutely beautiful. What does it represent?
It's absolutely fantastic. It's a design, actually, for animals.
It's hard to visualise, but if we freeze frame, we can highlight the different serpents. There's 1, 2, 3, possibly 4 monsters all intertwined.
It's absolutely beautiful. It's very carefully balanced, and it's absolutely superb design.
Now, the decoration on the pommel seems to be exactly the same as that on the hilt grips.
Yes, it's got exactly the same design. You can see the same wire work. You can see the finer pieces of wire down here, outlined by the very finest. And can you see the bit along there? It's worn away completely on the top. There's a lot of wear on this.
Right, and how's the wear produced?
It's actually probably where the owner has stood with his hand on the hilt. And a lot of pommels actually have wear in almost identical places. It's almost as though the men stand, as you would, of course, with your hand resting on the hilt of your sword.
Proudly resting on
the hilt of your sword.
Anglo-Saxon swords of this type are very rare and very hard to make. We asked a specialist blacksmith to show us how it was done. The starting point is an X-ray of a Saxon sword excavated some years ago. Close examination shows why they're called pattern-welded swords. These chevrons reveal the sword is made of many layers of iron forged into one blade. We started with 6 kilos of iron, but the final sword only weighs 1.5. After a week of hot, back-breaking work, the sword was finished. Only the very rich could afford such labour. The last stage is to reveal the pattern. Back at the British Museum, I met up with Angela and sword specialist Heinrich Herke.
I'm sure that they are functional. They are very rare. Swords overall are rare. In Anglo-Saxon England in the 5th to 7th centuries, perhaps 1 in 20 male adults would have been buried with a sword, any sword. Right. We're not even talking about a sword like this one here. Once we get to this social level, to this kind of decoration, we're talking about perhaps one man in 200, wow. or I suppose even fewer, would have had a sword like this.
Heinrich explained that our sword hilt belongs to a rare group called Beckham Valstenerum. He also suggested that our next stop should be Sweden.
Kevin, you made it?
Yes, I'm here.
Got your passport?
Yep, already. Now, what's this about? What's going on?
Get in the cab and I'll tell you.
Okay, but where are we going? My wife's a bit suspicious about this passport meeting in London.
Yeah, well, I'm taking you to Heathrow Airport.
Yes, then where?
We're going to go to Sweden.
Now, how am I going to explain that?
I've brought Kevin to the National Historical Museum in Stockholm, where curator Kent Anderson shows us their stunning collection of armour and weapons.
Well, here you have some of the swords in our collection, and mainly they are from the Viking age, but this one is earlier. It's contemporary to the one you have shown me.
It's lovely, isn't it? Stunning.
It's interesting to look at this one. You can see it's got a pattern welded blade with the zigzaggy pattern of iron and steel down the centre, and then the steel cutting edges running down either side of it. The sort of blade that our sword would have had it survived. Beautifully made.
And where's the other sword that we're going to?
Well, it's
further down.
In the exhibition. Good heavens, it's amazing. It's like a temple with all these superb things that just jumps out. And this is it.
These are the bits, aren't they? Incredible.
This is absolutely breathtaking work. It's very similar to the Lincolnshire find, but the decoration on this piece is much bolder. It's not as fine, but it's deeply cut and really making a statement of power.
Now, who would have owned something like this?
A king, of course.
Yeah.
It's so high quality that it only can belong to a king.
Now, why do we find such similar designs over here as we do in, say, our Lincolnshire sword?
The contacts must have been very directly, I think, and one must think of this society as a very travelling society. They were moving around across Europe. Giving gifts at this time was extremely important. So a sword with gold fittings would be a very good present from one king to another.
Now, is it possible that the owner of this sword could have known the owner of our sword?
They may have known of each other because it was very important to preserve the memory of great men. This is why Beowulf was written, to preserve someone's memory. And this belonged to a great man in Sweden,
yes.
And a great man in Lincolnshire would have known of people like that.
Yeah, in the sagas they would tell
Yes.
about this famous king or this famous person for hundreds of years.
So, Kevin, was it worth the trip?
Yes, it was. To actually see the stuff and to handle it, you realise how close the links are.
I mean, even to my untrained eye, looking at those swords, they looked remarkably similar to our sword hilt.
Yes, and it shows links at the very highest level. Things like this sword weren't traded. There was no trade in that sort of thing. They were exchanged as diplomatic gifts. So there was somebody who was a very big noise round here sending a really important object to someone who was also an equally big noise in Lincolnshire.
Our journey had started in rural Lincolnshire and had taken us not only to Sweden, but back in time to when fiercely loyal warriors would fight to the death for their master. Though we will never know the name of the king to whom this sword belonged, this symbol of his power and wealth will now be visible for generations to come.